Hello everyone, welcome to Fan Stories. In this video you will listen to the story named How to Tangle 4 Brave Guardians. It is the crossover of two movies, How to Train Your Dragon and Rise of the Guardians. This video is chapter 4 of the story.
So,
Hiccup trailed off.
How come only Toothless and I can see you?
They'd gone around the island but no one had noticed the winter spirit. Now the two boys were sitting in Hiccup's room and asking each other questions under the watchful eyes of Toothless, who'd finally agreed that Jack wasn't an enemy.
Well,
the Guardian didn't really know how to explain.
You two are special.
Hiccup furrowed his eyebrows.
Why?
Jack sighed.
Look, I don't really know why either, I'm just assuming. I only know that I gotta help Manny, that's Man and Moon, and he gave me some clues and a few apply to you. Like, there were 4 shadows, one of which mine, and I just figured the second was yours. Then I had a dream or a vision, you name it, and it started off with 2 pairs of green eyes that just so happened to be yours and Toothless, and a loud whistle, which is the first thing I heard when I got here, and I also saw something red which I now assume is your dragon's tail fin. Then there's that thing that clicked in my head when I saw a Triple H back in my time, and it clicked again when you said your name, which has this Triple H. Oh, and I saw a peg leg that's exactly the same as yours.
Hiccup nodded, somehow managing to find sense in his rant, but before he could say anything, Jack butted in.
Speaking of your prosthetic, there must be quite the story about it. Care to explain?
Suddenly growing uncomfortable, Hiccup started.
Well, Vikings and dragons used to be enemies here. Killing a dragon was the only thing that mattered, and yours truly was the worst Viking Burke had ever seen. I tried to prove myself to the others. Didn't work, as you can guess, I was way too muscular for their taste.
Even though the brunette was sarcastic, Jack caught a hint of bitterness in his voice and couldn't help but feel a bit sad. After all, he too had experienced rejection.
Then one night I actually shot down a Night Fury, the ultimate prize, the dragon of all dragons, if I may say. He was helpless, I could have killed him and all my trouble would have vanished. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Why?
Jack asked quietly, glancing at the now sleeping Toothless. His rider smiled unknowingly.
Looked at him. And I saw myself.
He expected the Guardian to ask, but the latter just nodded and gestured for him to continue.
We became friends, but my dad wasn't very fond of it.
His eyes darkened for a moment.
Anyway, he and the whole village went to fight the dragons on their island, and when they were faced with the Red Death, well, you can sorta imagine what happened, my leg being cut off in the explosion and all.
But the quick ending didn't satisfy Jack.
Wait, I think you're missing on a whole part of the story. What Red Death? What explosion?
Hiccup sighed.
The Red Death was the queen bee of the dragon's nest. It was all her who made them raid our village for food. She was controlling them and was going to kill my father and the whole tribe, so Toothless and I shot her down. But there was an explosion, her club tail hit us and we fell in the fire. Had it not been for Toothless, I would have died.
He looked at his friend with a small smile. When his eyes moved back, Jack was staring at him. Eventually, after a bit of awkward silence, the winter spirit spoke softly.
You're not one to be underestimated, huh? Thanks.
Hiccup awkwardly scratched his neck, then cleared his throat.
Anyway, we got terribly off topic. You were telling me about your dream vision thingy. You said that so far you've figured out 2 of the shadows, yours and mine, so we just have to find the other 2, and then, of course, we gotta figure out what exactly to do to help Man and Moon. Manny, was it? You wait, you're actually going to help me? Without, I don't know, pleading, persuading or manipulation? Yep.
The Viking answered, searching around.
I've always wanted to explore beyond the borders of the archipelago, and it's quite dull here anyway. Plus, it's clearly something of vital importance. Nothing else would have brought you here from the future.
Jack had to agree there. Hiccup sat back opposite him and opened a sketchbook.
Okay, describe the dream with the clues once again, this time slower, and I'll write down everything we know.
The Guardian did as told, and not 5 minutes later the two boys were sitting next to each other, thinking. looking over the notes.
The way I figure it,
Hiccup thought out loud.
these clues would only help us if we came across these people by chance. There must be at least a dozen turquoise-eyed archers, probably spread worldwide. The same goes to green-eyed singers, and those fireflies aren't helping either. It's the clicks that bug me. I don't think we'll get very far with the long blonde hair, but the Scottish accent's definitely something. Not much.
Jack disagreed.
Unless you know where Scotland is. I don't.
Hiccup grinned.
But my dad does. You never told me your father was the chief.
Jack accused. Hiccup only shrugged. The two boys were walking to the Great Hall, as Hiccup had called it. Well, at least the Viking was. Jack was flying as ever.
I get that he's chief and all, but that doesn't mean he knows where Scotland is.
The Guardian argued.
Allow me to know my father, okay? When he was young, his grandfather left to fight the Scottish. Dad was at the harbor. He saw the ships leaving. Yeah, okay, that means nothing. He's been really young, hasn't he? How could he know? Fine, maybe he doesn't, but he at least knows the general direction. I'm sure of it. Who are ye talking to, son? Both boys froze. They hadn't noticed they'd already reached the Great Hall. In front of them was standing the chief, and Jack immediately realized why he was called the Vast. The Guardian nervously whispered to the brunette, "Just found a crack in the plan. He can't see me." "Thank you for summing that up,"
Hiccup replied through gritted teeth, then turned to his father.
Dad, remember all those tales Gobber used to tell me when I was little?"
Stoic laughed.
"Of course I do. He's the one who made ye believe in trolls." That's true, but I was thinking of the story about the boy who brought winter." "Ye mean Jack Frost? What about him? He's too a legend, after all." "Actually, if you're going to be talking about stories, son, there's a better time. Now, if ye excuse me, I've to help Sven. Dad, he's real. And here."
Stoic looked at Hiccup surprised. The boy sighed.
"I'm not making this up, believe me."
He then nudged the Guardian, asking,
"Show him, okay?"
Jack nodded, and with one touch from his staff the ground was covered with a blanket of snow. Remembering Jamie, he concentrated, and a little snow dragon flew around the amazed chief before bursting in a small cloud of snowflakes. Then the spirit's mischievous side took over, and he frosted Stoic's beard, earning for this a glare from the brunette. Jack shrugged, chuckling.
"Hey, it's not my fault I'm the guardian of fun."
But suddenly he was lifted off the ground by the collar, and Hiccup snickered at the sight of his wide-eyed father, who was looking Jack up and down.
Hey, put me down,"
the Guardian demanded indignantly, wiggling in the air and noting the déjà vu. The chief looked an awful lot like a yeti.
"So it's true,"
Stoic murmured, and put him down, earning an annoyed thanks.
"What brings ye here?"
Jack looked at Hiccup, who nodded, and smiled sheepishly.
"It's a long story. That'd be enough for 2 days, though I doubt it'll take that much,"
Stoic announced as he packed a sack of fish on Toothless' saddle. The whole village was sending the two boys off. Eventually, and not without a few more proofs, all the Birkins had managed to see Jack, so the evening in the Great Hall was cooler than usual, pun intended. The twins had taken a particular liking to the winter spirit and had great fun with him. By the time Jack came back to speak to Hiccup, and Stoic, Tough and Rough were laughing hysterically. Freezing, but laughing nonetheless. On the more convenient side, the chief had shown them where on the map he supposed Scotland should be, so the boys were ready to leave as soon as the sun rose again.
"There."
Stoic secured the sack, then put a heavy hand on Hiccup's shoulder.
"Take care, son. Will do."
Hiccup smiled. A girl, Astrid, if Jack wasn't mistaken, came and poked the young Viking in the ribs, then swiftly kissed him on the cheek, saying softly afterwards,
"Be careful, okay?"
Hiccup nodded and mounted Toothless. Jack strode next to him, his signature smirk in place, and the Viking rolled his eyes.
"Oh, spare me. Let's go, so you won't have the chance to tease me."
The spirit's smirk only grew.
"How come?" "'Cause you'll be far behind, that's how." "Is that a challenge, Dragon Boy?"
Toothless laughed, sorta, as his rider grinned.
"Oh, you don't want to race a Night Fury, mate?"
With that they took off, and in a mere blink turned to a black speck against the vast blue sky. Jack stared at them for a second, the déjà vu once again shocking him, then shouted to no one in particular.
Why does this keep happening to me?
Then he too took off and ushered the wind so that he could catch up to his friends. It took him a couple of minutes to do so, and when he finally did, he realized that Toothless was actually gliding in a relaxed and pretty lazy manner. The Viking grinned at Jack.
Far behind, just as I said.
The Guardian mirrored his grin and, with quite a good imitation of an Australian accent, snapped.
Rack off, you bloody Chopiny. What was that?
Hiccup laughed. Jack smiled.
A friend of mine, real annoying, real grumpy and really full of himself.
It took Hiccup a few minutes to calm down and stop snickering after that. They flew in silence for a bit, then Hiccup asked.
What do we do when we get to Scotland? Dunno.
The Guardian shrugged.
Leave everything to fate, I guess. But we're still far from there, so let's have some fun.
With that he shot down head first and was just about to fall in the ocean when he pulled back up, and after a series of tricks, flips and dives, he leveled with the dragon and his rider again, wearing his signature smirk.
And I'm the show-off, eh?
Hiccup chuckled, his voice dripping with sarcasm.
It's not like you can do better.
The Guardian shrugged. Hiccup feigned an offended expression. He nudged Toothless and grumbled.
Bud, I'm jumping in the ocean. Jack's annoying me.
The dragon growled in acceptance, and before the spirit had fully processed what was going on, Hiccup jumped off of Toothless and they both dived headfirst in the air. Jack froze for a moment, but then... Whoa! Hiccup yelled and the Guardian exhaled freely. He doubted his friend would have yelled like that had he been plummeting to his death. Now certain of his well-being, he shot down to freefall with the other two circling them and laughing in glee. When the ocean came in view, Hiccup buckled himself back on the saddle and Toothless spread his wings, thus stopping their fall. Jack was quick to level with them.
How can you be doing that? You can't fly!
He exclaimed, still exhilarated by the stunt. Hiccup smirked.
So you take Toothless for nothing, huh?
He then broke into a grin.
But you gotta admit it was fun. Okay, I'll give you that. His friend laughed. I'll have to work really hard to beat that. Okay, I get it, you're the winter spirit. Could we just call it a?
Here Hiccup sneezed.
A tie so you can't stop?
True to his word, Jack had done something to beat the Vikings' free-falling stunt, this something being a snowstorm. It had been fun at first, but now flying was becoming harder and harder for Toothless, and even though the Guardian hated to admit it, things had gone beyond his control.
Well?
Hiccup shouted so that his friend could hear him through the howling wind.
Would you fix it already? How do I fix a blizzard?
Jack shouted back. He barely heard the answer.
I have no idea.
Somehow managing to find the duo, Jack yelled in Hiccup's ear.
This is becoming too much for you and Toothless. Let's land. I think I saw an island or something a while ago. Okay, but if the natives are hostile and try to send us to the Valhalla, I'll kill you.
The Viking shouted back, then directed Toothless down and out of the blizzard. The Guardian followed suit, leaving the storm to dissipate on its own devices. When they got out of the cloud they saw no island at all.
Jack.
Hiccup called.
That's not an island, it's the mainland. We've reached Scotland. Cool, Jack grinned. Now what? No idea.
The Viking answered.
Let's land and, what did someone say? Ah, yes, leave everything to fate. Come on, bud, we're landing. Oh, yeah, haha.
The Guardian rolled his eyes and descended as well.
So, where exactly are we?
He asked as soon as his feet touched the ground.
Again, no idea, never been outside the archipelago, remember? All I know is that we're in some weird circle of stone pillars, one of which fallen, but you can see that for yourself.
Absent-mindedly replied the brunette, his eyes scanning the area and landing on the fallen pillar. He dismounted Toothless and kneeled next to the stone to examine it. Jack took a look around for himself. There wasn't much to be added to Hiccup's description. Beyond the circle there were only trees and trees and trees and a blue flame and trees and trees and tray.
Wait, what?
Jack exclaimed. Indeed, there was a small blue flame hanging in the air at eye level not far away from the Guardian. What's more, its shape vaguely resembled that of a human, and right now its tiny little arms were beckoning him over.
Hiccup, You might wanna check this out.
He called to his friend.
A skeleton under it? What could have possibly? Huh, what? Yeah, go, I'll catch up in a minute. The Viking answered automatically and continued mumbling to himself. Jack rolled his eyes and slowly moved towards the blue flame. It let out an eerie sigh and melted in the air, just to appear a few meters further on the border of the trees, and waving him over again. Jack stepped towards it, but someone growled next to him, "Toothless." A question was clear in his green eyes. "Gotta follow it, Toothless, I won't be long,"
the spirit promised, then jerked his head towards Hiccup.
"Look after him, will you? He's too concentrated to notice anything."
The dragon warbled and went to stand guard by his rider while Jack lightly flew towards the little flame. It let out another sigh and disappeared, but this time it was a whole bunch of flames that formed a path through the forest. The guardian didn't hesitate a second and followed them. He noticed that the trees were lessening with each moment he went into the forest. Or should he say out of it? Oh well. Suddenly he heard a twang, then a whistle and something like a knock. Without even thinking, Jack ushered the wind to reach the sounds. A minute later the wind threw him in an opening, a wide meadow bathed in sunlight. Jack landed and was just about to take a look around when an arrow nearly beheaded him. "What the?" he cried, annoyed. Why did people in the past have to be so intent on killing him?
"Hey!"
another voice shouted.
"What I think you're doing?"
Jack turned around to the other person and looked at them, ready to argue, but was left dumbfounded. A pair of turquoise eyes were staring back this time, and his peripheral vision picked a whole lot of arrows spilled on the ground.
"The third shadow,"
Jack murmured, not realizing that he was staring at the owner of the voice with his mouth slightly ajar. The owner of the voice, he observed, was a girl with fiery red hair, seemingly no older than him or Hiccup. He failed to notice, however, her angry expression.
"Don't think I've no idea what happened,"
she accused, almost deafening Jack with her thick Scottish accent.
"Da wind blew ye here and misdirected my arrow. 'Tis your fault I missed my target." Hey, calm down, I'm sorry."
The guardian tried to defend himself. The girl opened her mouth to retort, but was interrupted by the loud sound of flapping wings. A second later Toothless landed in the opening.
"Jack, you won't believe how easy it was to find you," Hiccup said as he jumped off the saddle. "I could hear you fro."
Suddenly he stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes had landed on the girl.
"Marita? Hiccup."
You have just listened Chapter 4 of the story How to Tangle 4 Brave Guardians. Subscribe and waiting for Chapter 5 of this interesting story. Thank you for listening.